Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 202, Lysis 204 A to C. I think it's fair to say that we don't know very much about Mikkos. He's mentioned only in this dialogue, and we aren't told very much when he is referred to. He is a hetairos of Socrates. Hetairos is a comrade or companion, and what it almost certainly doesn't mean here is that he is a slave, as some scholars have suggested. There is no reason why a slave would be considered a hetairos of Socrates, a full citizen. What we do know is that he has just opened a palaestra, a wrestling school, which again would indicate that Mikkos is not a slave. It's only after Hippothales says that they spend most of their time in the wrestling school in conversations, logoi, that Socrates asks who teaches there, which might lead the listener to conclude that Mikkos is a sophistes dealing with logoi, or rhetoric. It doesn't seem to me likely that a sophist would open a wrestling school and then teach in it rhetoric. It's far more likely that he opened a wrestling school in order to teach people how to wrestle. And the older youths like to sit around in the wrestling school and watch the younger boys wrestle. Of course, they themselves could also wrestle, but it seems that most of their time is taken up talking and therefore watching at the same time. We should say something about diatribe, passing time. A sophist and his pupils could be referred to as a diatribe, or even a schole. A diatribe would refer to the fact that they are wasting time, and schole would refer to the fact that they have free time, and the students are indulging in conspicuous consumption. All the people who are working can look at them and understand that they have rich parents. Both schole and diatribe came to mean a lesson, but then schole went back to referring to a school or a school of thought. Hippothales says that he and his friends spend time in the palaestra with very many and handsome, let us say, youths, which makes it clear that for Hippothales this is the main point of being in the wrestling school. And he also says that the diatribe is mainly en logos, in words, which means that he, at least, spends most of his time in the wrestling school talking. Since Mikkos presumably is actually training people in wrestling, this is not a diatribe in the sense of a lesson where a teacher and his pupils engage in some intellectual pursuit. This is simply wasting time, passing time in chatting while watching other handsome young people wrestle. Given the proclivities of Hippothales, it's interesting that Socrates turned the conversation back to the teaching. He's the one who asked who teaches there, and he is now enthusing about the expertise of Mikkos. This talk about the expertise of Mikkos doesn't last very long. Hippothales now asks, Boule un hepestai effe hina kai ides tus ontas autothi. So do you want to follow, he said, so that you too may see the ones here? Hippothales is clearly more interested in the young and handsome youths in the wrestling school, and he assumes that Socrates would be as well. This is what he uses to entice Socrates into the wrestling school. Socrates, however, has already worked out that Hippothales is interested in someone in particular. Proton hedeos accusai an epito kai esemi kai tis hokalos. First of all, I'd like to hear for what I'll be going in and who is the handsome youth. We only have hokalos, the handsome, but it's masculine. Socrates doesn't even ask whether Hippothales has someone he's particularly interested in. He simply asks who he is. We should note that by delaying entering the wrestling school, we will have two conversations. One with the older boys and probably one with the younger boys when we get inside. Well, I say we when Socrates gets inside. Allos ephe allo hemon doke, O Socrates. Each of us, he said, thinks a different one is handsome, Socrates. Apart from the truism that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, there may be some profound philosophical truth here, but we're not going to get into it at the moment. There is no justification for it. We should understand that Hippothales has basically given away the fact that he does in fact have someone in mind, but he gives away the fact that every other one in his group has other people in mind. It follows that there are at least as many younger boys in the wrestling school as there are older boys outside. Soide deitis, O Hippothales, toutomoi epe. Who seems to you, Hippothales? Tell me this. Kai hos erotethes eruthriasen. And he, having been asked, blushed. Kai go epon, O pai hieronymu Hippothales, toutomen meceti epes, ete erastu ete me. And I said, O son of Hieronymus Hippothales, you should no longer say this, whether you lust for someone or not. I'm going to translate the verb erao as to lust for rather than to love. Eros is not love, it is lust. It's a sexual attraction. This is neither a positive nor a negative emotion. It is lust, it's a natural attraction, but it is not, certainly not, a positive philosophical love. The idea that Plato himself thinks that eros is a good thing is simply because in the Dialogue Symposium there are speeches in praise of the god Eros, and obviously in speeches in praise of a god there is going to be a lot of positive praise, but very little in the way of truth, because in speeches in praise of anyone, in any encomium, there is a lot of rhetoric. In that dialogue, Socrates exploits the fact that he has to give a speech in praise of Eros to turn the discussion towards philosophy and the good. This by no means turns Eros from a sexual attraction into anything other than that. If we look at the even later dialogue Politeia, there Eros is treated as the worst emotion possible, the tyrant suffers from eros, an overwhelming lust for any perceived good things in other people which the tyrant will desire for himself. As I say, eros itself, lust, is neither a good thing nor a bad thing philosophically. It is sexual attraction, it's a natural thing, and that is how we will treat it until there is a reason not to treat it like that. What we can say at the moment is that Hippothales is suffering from lust. Oidegar hoti monon eras ala kai poro ede poriomenos tu erotos. For I know that you not only lust, but that you are already far on the way, making your way in lust. Socrates uses poriomenos, the same verb that he used earlier to say that he was making his way from academy to lyceum, while in Socrates' case this making of his way from academy to lyceum is intentional. It's not clear to me just how intentional even Socrates intends this making Hippothales' way along lust. Even if it's a very long way, was it intentional, or does Hippothales simply allow it to happen? People then, as now, think that lust is something which happens to people. At that time they could blame Aphrodite, the goddess of lust. Emi dego tamen alla faulos kai achrestos, tuto de moipos, ektheu dedotai, tehi hoiotenai gnonai erontate kai eromenon. But I, although worthless and useless in other things, this has somehow been given to me by God to be able to recognize quickly the one lusting and the one being lusted after. The one being lusted after is a participle, and this is the regular denotation of the one being lusted after. But the one lusting, Socrates here uses the participle, the one lusting, rather than the more usual noun erastes, the luster. Most people would call this the lover, but he is a luster. In this of all dialogues, we have to distinguish between lust and love. As for the power to discern a luster and the one lusted, I don't think Socrates really needs a god to have given him that particular power.